Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy and Mike. Good morning, everybody. We're talking about some cool stuff today. How you doing, Tommy?
Oh, yeah. Another good week, man.
Another good week. All right, we're going to jump in today. Our main topic today will be DevOps and You, and then your team, and also your data. Just kind of unpacking this story here around DevOps and data ops, potentially. Going into a bit deeper here. But before we get into our main topic today, Tommy, we have to get into some of the blog announcements. Tommy was
major announcements.
I wouldn't say you were ragging me, but you were definitely like, Tommy, you're telling me, how did I miss this blog article that came out recently? It was on May 22nd. It was a couple last month, I guess. Tommy, you want to give us the introduction? What is this article you found, and what is your opinion about this?
Well, first off, game changer. I'm going to absolutely use this as a game changer.
Oh my gosh, you better not.
So I don't know how we missed this, but I'm just going to say the title. There's no other way to do this. SharePoint file destinations.
Yep.
Is the first file destination for data flows Gen 2.
Whoa. What is going on here?
So what this means is what we can do is we already know in data flows Gen 2, we can push the data to a database, a lakehouse, various other like data sources. Well, Microsoft wanted to take that one step further. And now one of the destinations can be SharePoint in a CSV format. So I can basically take any data flow Gen 2 and push that to a SharePoint folder. And now I have more CSV files.
I mean, if you want to like do a data flows Gen 2, push files to SharePoint, and then go get those files from another Power BI from an import somewhere, like, oh man. Okay, I'll say this. I think it needs to be a feature that exists because people are probably asking for it. It probably needs to be out there. But on the other hand, I'm looking at this going, we really don't want to be doing data flows Gen 2 back into SharePoint. There's probably use cases for it. Someone's going to complain about it, and someone's going to say, yes, this needs to be done for my organization. We're doing some kind of data exportation, something. It's got to come from there. But man, I really just like the whole SharePoint as a data set.
Like sometimes it's just the evil necessity, because it's just the worst case scenario, but it still works to get data into Power BI. But
why would I work so hard to get to data flows Gen 2 in Fabric and then put it back in SharePoint?
Right. I really would love for people to ask us or tell us why they're going to use this or what this solves. Because everything about Power BI is I can take all these dumb CSV files in a folder and centralize it. And now I'm doing the opposite kind of thing. That's like, Mike, I have a great new invention for you. A lot of people like scrambled eggs. I'm introducing the normal egg kind of thing. We're just going to eat that raw, or you're on Rocky style. That's actually a better way to eat it. It's like, no. There's a process to get this tasting better. I'm really intrigued if anyone saw this one. Oh yeah, that's what we need.
So I'm going to just go through this one out there. So if you're using this one, I would love to hear some comments in the chat or down below in the comments of this video. Are you interested or excited about SharePoint as a destination for data flows Gen 2? And then I'd be also interested in what would be your use case. I would be really curious if you're using it, why are you using this? Maybe there's a bunch of users you have that don't have access to Power BI or don't have access to a Fabric workspace. That's acceptable. I understand, but I'd also be curious to see what people are using it for. Yeah, and Donald, you make a great point. SharePoint is everywhere. Almost every organization has some of that, and it probably is easier to get people to access data from there. But I just feel like there's a better way. Okay, enough of that one. We can talk about that. We can rag on that one all day.
They are working. The last sentence, I just got to mention it, man, because they're not stopping.
Okay.
This is just the beginning. Data flows Gen 2 plans to expand file-based destinations to other formats and platforms. So,
I mean, I'm not sure where else you'd want to go. Your hard drive locally, go back, reverse gateway. You go back through the gateway back to your local machine. Let's next year they're gonna. I can't wait till May 5th or what is it? April 5th, April 1st when they do the jokes. Data flows now being able to write to tablets, stone tablets, chiseled included. Let's go backwards all the way in time.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Dataflow now knows how to write in hieroglyphics.
Right. Yeah. Introducing data flows to Notepad. And when we mean Notepad, we mean you get mailed your data.
Email your data.
No, you get it in a binder. You get it in
The binder. It's mail. It's shipped to you. It's mailed to you.
Exactly.
The amount of CUs you'd have to use to get that to work.
Mailed data. Yeah.
Yeah. All your CUs for the whole month is used up in one export activity. Yeah. All right, Tommy, what else do you have? You got a couple other news items here. One from Chris Webb, it looks like.
Actually, two from Chris Webb, because I love everything Chris Webb writes. He always writes, honestly, sometimes the most intriguing way he's looking at a lot of the technology, and they're both around CoPilot with Power BI. The first one is finding reports in semantic models easily with CoPilot search. And I think we've all struggled with this when we're dealing with any AI model, but especially all the reports. I want to find a specific item in a report, not just the report, but we know how much overlap with the word sales or whatever the case may be. So what he actually kind of does a few experiments, and what he actually looks at is CoPilot also looks at the metadata, not just the report name, but the text in the report itself. So he has a report that's named CoPilot _ with QA optimizations. Sure. And so not a really great report name, but on the first page, he has a big text title, just text visual that says the farm sales reports. So in CoPilot standalone, all he did is simply say, hey, find that report for Fruity Farms. And what CoPilot returned, the first result was that CoPilot one. It didn't look at the report name. It actually looked at the information and the context in the report itself.
This is one that I've gotten a lot of pushback from Microsoft on this kind of stuff. I mean, one of the things that when CoPilot initially came out, it was a way of doing search. It could index things, it could get a bunch of information together, it could find those details for you. I got a lot of pushback initially, Tommy. Whenever I talked to Microsoft about this one, they were like, no, CoPilot is not search. Don't use CoPilot for search. And here we are looking at a full-on, this doesn't seem like it needs to have CoPilot in order or to read what's inside the files of Excel, inside the files of Power BI. Doesn't feel like that needs to be a CoPilot level feature, but it seems like it's being manifested in a way that look, we can use CoPilot and use a search type capability. We'll add this enhancement around searching. And by the way, we'll read the PBIR format, not just the name of the files. We'll search a couple more things. I think this is definitely a big win. I really do find that this is going to be valuable. But if you're going to charge me, so this is the thing. This is just search. This is just search through the files that are made in the reports. And yet now we're charging ourselves more money to run a CoPilot search. It feels a little bit like a bait and switch to me here a little bit. Can't we just have Azure indexing just work just fine on this and keep it cheap? Why do I have to go to CoPilot and spend tokens searching for things there? Anyways, feels a little bit weird to me here around the search part of this one. I get that it needs to be done. This is definitely a feature people want. I think you want to be able to search for text inside the files, or even to be, for that matter, Tommy, on visuals themselves, you kind of want to even search through what data is showing up on those visuals.
There's a lot of, there's a lot of metadata, tooltips, all that. And I totally get that. So it's a neat, and that's the interesting thing you bring up, because I initially looked at this in my dumb self and went, oh, that's awesome. That's great. Looking at what Chris Webb did. But to your point, Mike,
we've been doing search for years. Bing has been around forever. It's got this indexing service that sits on top of stuff and indexes all the information and provides you the best details. Why do I need CoPilot for this one? So maybe I'm missing something here. Maybe there's something it's happening behind the scenes here that's just way more advanced that I don't see. But when I look at this at the first glance, I'm like, cool, glad it exists. Don't really love the fact that I'm getting charged CoPilot pricing to go find stuff.
Yeah, especially that search has been in Power BI since
forever.
Yeah,
that little search window bar has shown up on top of the screen for quite a while. Anyways, all right, two dud articles, Tommy. Let's go to the third one.
If CoPilot just does search, I'm going to be really upset with this most of the time. All right, here's where we can step up our news game a little.
Okay.
So, how do you actually get CoPilot to do more than just return a report or do search? How do you actually do something more advanced than just return a table? So what Chris Webb is kind of putting together is how do you actually give instructions to Power BI CoPilot to group and filter?
Okay, now this feels relevant to me, right? This feels right. I like this idea. I think CoPilot should be the thing that you talk to. It helps you write a SQL statement that returns grouped, aggregated, and filtered data. So basically building a simple select where clause in there makes a ton of sense. I think this makes a lot of sense to me.
I love the first thing he does is, and this is so, like, we have to be so special with CoPilot. He simply does a bad example of a prompt where he says, show sales of luxury houses in California.
Yep.
And he's like, sure enough, the result looks like cryptic words that CoPilot returned back.
Oh no.
So it's hilarious. Like, I don't know what to do with that. And he's simply saying CoPilot is doing what you kind of asked, but there are kind of not enough clarifications. So
Yeah.
are you asking sales as a column, sales as a metric, etc.? So he actually goes through starting with the columns that should be returned. If the user expects to see columns for transactions or in a certain order, it's kind of helpful to know your data too. He actually adds in AI instructions to simply say the source data comes from this particular semantic model. The transaction table contains one row. The address property is sold, and he adds what columns and what order. So
that's the kind of stuff that I like. That makes a ton more sense.
And the thing is, you have to do that either for every prompt, or that's going to be what you do in your AI instructions. But that tidbit, if you do read this, the AI instructions to achieve this, I would print that out, put it on your wall to remember this, because this is going to be, bar none, the most essential thing for anything to work in CoPilot.
Yeah, and that's a really good way of thinking about this, Tommy, because that's how I think about when I start doing data things. Like I very rarely go out and write a query without even looking at the data even once. I almost always start with a top 10, top 100 row of a table, and then I kind of get the lay of the land of, okay, what does this data look like? Then I start grouping, so when I'm doing exploration stuff in SQL, it's always a select star top 100 from a table, and we start there, right? So unless you know your data really, really well, I think what the CoPilot should do is it should basically say, you could communicate, I'm trying to look for this data joined together on these columns, if you know what you're talking about. But then the CoPilot could say, look, I found this information. Here's some simple queries I ran. Here's how many distinct values we have in this column. Here's how many, we have a join, and the join matches, 100% of the records, like things like that it's just going to be able to give you as like other artifacts. That's a whole bunch of extra queries that the thing can just auto generate and design, and then report back the results, and then not only give you the answer, but it gives you these little statistics with it. I think that would be really useful.
And the problem is, though, he knows the data because he's built it. He's kind of obviously someone who is comfortable working in that. For a lot of people, they maybe not all know all the properties, and they're going to ask business questions. They are going to ask for, what are my top sales accounts, or who do I need to ask? And unless that has been a finely tuned prepped model where you also know how people are going to ask all their questions, CoPilot's not going to understand, because it has to have that context on what the data and what they're referring to.
Yeah. Donald in the chat here, I'm going to make a call on this one because this could be pretty funny as well. Donald says, I always explore and prototype my data in Power Query. And I would agree. Power Query is a great tool to explore, see the data, see data columns, get some data profiling. But now I would ask, are you sharing it in SharePoint? Are you saving it down to SharePoint? So now I explore my data and I save it down to SharePoint. Just kidding. We'll move on. All right. Enough of our news items today. Tommy, let's get into our main topic for today. What is our main topic for today?
We are talking about DevOps and us. We are always working on process and technology. Obviously, we're focused in our little data space. However, there is more than meets the eye in terms of how your data flows from source to the final input, and both from testing, from development, and to trust. And one of the big ways in software development that we as BI people have taken a lot from. Oh,
Oh, speaking of that, Tommy, someone's
I think someone's calling you.
we got a call in here. Let's get our call in here. Welcome to the show, Matias, Thierbach. Welcome. We have brought a guest with us today. So, Tommy, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but Matias has some things to say around DevOps, and we'd love to bring you onto the
Probably
show.
better, yeah.
Matias, welcome to the show today. We appreciate you jumping in here and talking with us about DevOps. Let's unpack this topic. What's going on here? So, Tommy, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but go ahead. Let's unpack DevOps. Matias, welcome.
Yes, hi. Good morning to you and everyone, and really happy and excited to be on here. So yeah, thanks for having me. And DevOps is something I live and breathe. So let's have a good chat about it.
No, I've got to give Matias mad kudos here because he is a genius, and there's always this time. So I'm a musician, or at least I try to be, and I try to play music with other musicians who are way better than I am. Matias is way better than both Tommy and I put together. He's super smart, thinks things through way better than I do. I kind of shoot from the hip a lot of times, but Matias has been the one created PBI tools. So for those of you in the community who use PBI tools, Matias is the creator of PBI tools. Amazing, by the way. This was DevOps before Power BI had any kind of inclination of DevOps. We could rip apart a PBIX file. Incredible. And then now also recently, Timdal is another child of your creation. Maybe give us a little bit there. Like why are these two things so important to you, Matias, and how do these impact our DevOps?
Big questions, right?
Big questions.
I'm very grateful you mentioned Timdal because that's certainly something I'm really proud of. Particularly because it's actually having a good time right now, right? We've got Timdal View. There's a lot of innovation happening, and also a lot of excitement in the community, it seems. And it's just fantastic. When you think about something that was a technical spec at some point, and actually something sort of very fundamental in terms of tech, actually sort of growing up and becoming an adult and living on like that. So yeah, very good. So I've been excited about DevOps for practically 2 decades now, and you mentioned PBI tools. PBI tools was created because I couldn't help myself but to basically hack Power BI to sort of make it DevOps compatible, right?
Yes.
At the time when PBI tools came about, and I started I started coding on PBI tools between 2016 and 2018, basically. This couldn't have been further from the reality of Power BI. So what did I do? I basically broke into the PBIX file format and made it possible to look inside, made it possible to put it into source control, made it possible to see when you've made a change in desktop, what does it actually look like sort of inside. And then ultimately made it possible to apply good old practices from software development in terms of source control and CICD and branching and merging and automated deployments. All these things are related to DevOps. So Timdal pretty much came out of that because whilst we had a file format for semantic models, which was TimZIL, huge JSON document, TMSL. They were not great for collaboration. They were not great for understanding diffs. And so Timdal was born exactly out of that need. And so you didn't mention PBIR. That's the final piece missing in the puzzle. So PBIR to Power BI reports, as in pages and visuals and bookmarks and all of that, is like Timdal to semantic models, right?
Yes.
It's the modern source control friendly file format that's officially supported by Microsoft, and PBIR in particular happens to be well documented using JSON schemas.
Yes.
So it's awesome in terms of thinking about putting some automation on top of it and creating advanced tooling. I think there's a lot to come. We talked about Timdo and Timdo View, but I think ultimately there's a lot more to come in terms of automation around PBIR and reports. But at this point, PBIR is still in public preview.
Okay, good call out there. Yeah, it is. It's in public preview, but boy, is it getting a lot of love from the community. I absolutely love it. It's super enjoyable. And there's been a couple versions of PBIR. I work on building tools around the report side of things. There was like a PBIR version 1. Now we're on PBI kind of version 2 now. But boy, do I love the PBIR format. So let me just kind of step back here for our audience who's not like, oh wow, we love DevOps. Like we're going to be all in on this. So I'm going to kind of maybe pull up here a bit, a higher level here, just for our audience that is thinking about this. Like, what is DevOps? Why is this so important? Why are we even bringing on a guest to do this? So let me just give a bit of my mental model around what DevOps is doing and why Timdal, PBIR, the Timsel, why is all of this so important to us? So when you look at a Power BI file, when we save a Power BI file, we have this PBIX file, which is actually just a zipped folder of a bunch of other pieces, artifacts, little files inside it that we can't really see. Microsoft makes it easy. We can save it, we can bundle it up, and we can ship it over to powerbi.com. Awesome. The trick here is, if you think about what's inside the report, this is how I mentally think about this one. Again, Matias, you feel free to correct me, but I think of it, when I look at all the individual pages, every single object inside the report has some sort of definition to it. There's a visual. That visual has data fields. It has properties. It has styling, the size of it. All these things need to be captured. And Microsoft just said, look, we're going to shove all this stuff into one big JSON file, and then that'll work. They know how to programmatically read it. Computers are great at reading large files and parsing through things, and no problem. Not a big deal there. But me as a user, or even a team of people, right, if it's just one person working on the report or the semantic model, not that big a deal. I mean, there's some argument to say it's good to have backups of things, so when you royally screw up your measure or you publish something incorrectly, you can go back in time and go back to that older version. But when Tommy and I started working on things together, that's when it gets like to be a pain. Like, I want to work on page 1. Tommy wants to work on page 2. Well, we can't merge our changes. We had to, I'd have to like check out a file, do my changes, and then give the file back over to Tommy. Okay, Tommy, now it's your turn to do the changes. So, when we think about DevOps, I think about it in a collaborative way. The larger your team gets, so leadership of our companies are going to be like, hey, we want to go quicker. We have all these little files that we have, these Power BI files that are laying around here. And how do we get more people to glob on to doing the work? That means we need to take the file itself and break it into smaller pieces, right? What if Tommy could work on page 1, Mike could work on page 2, and Matias, you could go work on the semantic model? Okay, how that's more efficient, right? That is, we're now not doing things in series; we're doing them in parallel. Sorry, Tommy, go ahead. You were going to say something.
No, I was going to say I kind of want to take a little step back for a lot of people where when they hear DevOps, I'm like, what are we building in JavaScript? And like, so like everything you said is completely right, but I think a lot of people, especially when they start with Power
that's my mental model.
Yeah, for a lot of people that ain't kind of thing. So, but there's a lot of Power BI pros came into it not from a developer's background. They were not building websites or applications, or they front end or back end. They did not know what either of those terms meant. So obviously we knew there could have been a better way, but we weren't.
We didn't. Matias did.
Right.
That's the point here.
So, and the nice thing about that was you didn't have to be a developer, so to speak, to do Power BI. Now, introducing all of a sudden this influx, and it's really increased, especially over the last years, the idea of DevOps and data, and they're having this crossover. What I think is a lot of people's misconception is the only people who should be doing that are people who are heavy enterprise developing data. So I guess for someone who is, I do Power BI, and listen, we get a ton of mailbacks still that are just, can we just talk about Power BI? If I'm just doing Power BI, why is DevOps something I need to know about?
So who are you going to ask that one to, Tommy?
I'm going to leave it to the expert in the room here. So,
all right, Matias, who is DevOps good for?
Everyone, right?
I'd
So
agree.
let me start with one thing. What DevOps is not.
Oh, that's a good part.
Right?
Yeah, let's do that too. I love it.
Microsoft happens to have a product that's called Azure DevOps, right?
And yes.
I wanted to make it very clear, we don't talk about that right now,
Yes.
or at least not primarily. It obviously there is a bit of a connection here, but DevOps is not a tool. DevOps is not something you buy or you get a license for, right? So very, very key. DevOps is a set of processes. You talked about collaboration. I would add testing. I would add quality to it. At the end of the day, from my point of view, DevOps is everything you do to deliver faster, efficiently, and at high quality. So it's those three qualities, really: fast, efficient, quality, right? Why are we talking about that, right? So I was in the software world many years before joining sort of the data world, and in software engineering, there's a lot of history in teams and people and very smart people coming up with better solutions for things, right? So we're probably going back 30 years or so. This is where DevOps is coming from. In the software world, teams have established those principles and have evolved them and have become better and better at delivering fast at scale with high quality. And so we're talking about this because we would be foolish not to try to build on top of that, right?
Yes.
What software teams need and have needed is, to a large degree, what data teams need as well. Why would we want to repeat their mistakes? Why would we want to reinvent the wheel? Why would we start from scratch? There's so much evolution in a digital world. Let's learn from that. And again, it turns out that a lot of the tools and practices and principles and processes are actually applicable in the data world. As long as, and this is how we come back to PBI tools and Timnel and all of that, as long as stuff goes into source control, and that's really the underlying piece. And we need to make sure that anyone wanting to take on some of the goods of DevOps fully embraces source control. Without that, you're not going to get very far.
So I want to also be very clear here as well. I think there's a lot of language from Microsoft around CICD. Like I hear a lot of and I think also, Matias, I think sometimes, especially with the way Microsoft is communicating what's happening in this DevOps space. So we're talking about DevOps. Donald, again, you're spot on. DevOps is something that you are, right? It's kind of like a noun, right? I am part of the DevOps. That's what we do. I like that thought, but DevOps is like a principle. There's ideas behind it. We're talking about fast, efficient, and with high quality. Like that makes sense to me. It's more like it's a process that we're integrating with how can we build software in an efficient way. However, when we talk about continuous integration, continuous deployment, CI/CD, that's a language I hear a ton out of Microsoft's mouth all the time. But I don't think CI/CD is the full story of what is DevOps. It's like a part of it.
Yeah.
It's definitely required to be a piece of it, but it's not the whole thing. And then I'm going to go kick it back here to Matias, to you, and we've talked on this a little bit here. What's your perspective on CI/CD in comparison to DevOps?
Very good point. And to be honest, I've been getting a bit frustrated personally about the overuse of CI/CD in our space, right?
Agree.
I think a couple of months ago, I even posted exactly on that on LinkedIn, saying I think there's a bit too much emphasis on CI/CD, which actually is just a technology. CICD is a very particular sort of set of tools and technologies that came out of DevOps, so it's very much part of it, but it's not the whole thing. And I think key, if you want to get all the benefits, Donald very nicely said better, stronger, faster. If you want to get all those benefits, merely focusing on CICD is not going to get you anywhere. In fact, I would argue if you just focus on CICD, you're going to spend more money and
Wow.
without actually getting necessarily other benefits, right? So DevOps is about many people say DevOps is a culture or a methodology. It's very holistic. It's about breaking down barriers. It's about creating cross-functional teams. It's about sort of dividing work in smart ways. It's about integrating and automating. Which is why I mentioned just getting a license for Azure DevOps is not sufficient. This is really about rethinking how do we actually produce something meaningful as a team, and how can we do that at scale.
I like this.
Once you start thinking about that, it trickles down, because then you have lots and lots of sort of sub problems to solve, both in terms of technology and tooling, but also in terms of collaboration, etc. And we are so lucky today that there is so much evolution we can all learn from. So let's do that. That should be the takeaway for people.
I love that takeaway. Tommy, reactions. What are your thoughts on this?
It's interesting that the big theme there is the collaboration side of things, because honestly, when there's a blog article around the CICD or just around source control, it can be very intimidating for a lot of people, and it's heavy around the developer. You're need to have some certain set of skill applications and understand that technical process to achieve it. And I think that's what people just think you have to do. It's my way to take a ton of files, go through the code, and I know I have to write in a terminal. That's what people think. But what we're hearing is, no, if you want to collaborate to the fullest, not just we're going to create process for process sake, but if you want to collaborate as the best you possibly can, remotely, then this is the way to go. And I hesitate to ask a few questions here because
don't
hesitate. Go ahead, do it.
This makes a lot of sense and this will be kind of my I'll take the other side here, but this makes a ton of sense, especially when you are dealing with things like such as repositories that are heavily where there's a lot of dependencies around files. There's a ton of configuration that's involved. And I think a lot of people are like, you're taking something easy like a Power BI report that I can drag and drop. And now you're almost like the SharePoint to data files. And now you're making it a ton of different files. And now you're just splitting hairs, and there's a different schema. There's dependencies. Listen, I've thrown a mouse already because of some transaction was not available because of the Git didn't, whatever happened to source control, I'm going to open a report. And so we're trying to, again, open this binary file, but we're dealing with it on source control, where most DevOps things, and correct me if I'm wrong, but usually in DevOps, you're not working in the application that you're trying to build. Like that's the end goal, if that makes sense.
You're talking from the software side of things, right? Like you're saying, like if I'm building a piece of software, right?
Right. I'm not also using that software to build my end goal. Whereas what we're doing with Power BI, especially, well, I have all this schema and definitions, but I'm also opening up Power BI desktop and modifying it there.
Can I come in here?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Because I'm a bit worried we're focusing too much on the inputs here, schemas and files and commits and whatnot. I think the whole point of this culture change that DevOps is supposed to bring us is actually a big perspective change. You want to think about outputs, right? Why are we in a data space? Why are we working in Power BI or Fabric? Because ultimately, we're delivering value to some stakeholders, ideally C-suite, who are going to get insights from dashboards and reports and whatnot, right? And so the whole point of DevOps and everything related to it is really about how do we get them what they need better, faster, stronger. There we go. Reading from Donald there, right? So
Yeah.
this is what it's all about, it only if you then start thinking about this, what does that mean? So, for instance, right? One thing that immediately follows is you need to test, right?
Yes.
If you're giving something to your group CEO or so, you better make sure that they're looking at the right number.
100%.
So testing needs to be part of this. You can always test manually. Does that scale? Is that efficient? No. So in an ideal world, you invest in automated testing, right? So that's a big part of DevOps. Same thing is, you mentioned collaboration. This is all about scale, right? Do I have one person working on adding in a new visual, with a new measure, or do I have a team of 100, possibly across different time zones, right? If it's the latter, which in all sort of practical contexts is usually what's required, we have a whole range of new problems in terms of how they collaborate. How do you divide up the work? What are dependencies? How do you document what you've done? How do you integrate? And so this is where the whole DevOps movement has developed tools and practices how to make those things viable and feasible and manageable, but only because the end goal is to actually have better outputs, right? And so that's really key here, to think, what am I delivering? What's the value I'm actually shipping? If I think I've mentioned cross-functional teams earlier, right? I'm a big proponent of that, and I think it's really important. Having someone who is very close to the end users, very well attached to the engineering team, from my point of view, is super important. Just engineer, I'm an engineer myself at heart, right? I know. I mean, I can really lose myself in lines of code, and I can go all in and love it. But ultimately, that's not what creates the value we are here to ship. And so having someone who reminds every single engineer on a daily basis why we're doing that, I think is also part of it. Sorry, I'll
go ahead.
Just one more thought, right?
No, it's a great thoughts. I love these thoughts.
If you look at the history of it, right, DevOps is obviously merging two different concepts together, right? So the whole history of how DevOps and also the concept of DevOps came about was because historically you had this very strict delineation between developers and operations people, right? And so breaking down those barriers was huge, because traditionally business had not worked like that. And so this kind of mindset is something we should still embrace today, right? Break down barriers, bring in even to the low-level developer, what the ultimate goal is here, and remind them of that.
I want to tag on, as you're saying these things, Matias, I'm immediately thinking about a conversation I had with someone. I apologize. I don't remember who it was. I can't remember when it was happening. But someone was telling me, if you think about your development team, Power BI, software, it doesn't matter what it is, there's going to be people on your team that are the seniors, people that know everything, how to do all the experiences there. And so one of the reasons we think about DevOps, talking to this better, faster, stronger concept, is how do you scale your smartest people? Like the people at the top of your development, the ones who know the semantic model really well, they're tuning it, they're making it very performant. How do you, so again, back to our point here, what happens when we need a bigger team? What happens when we need more work done? What happens when we need more reports completed? listen to anyone on the Power BI space. You want a nice, good, fast-running semantic model, and you want not just one, because a one-to-one relationship between semantic model and reports not as efficient. I'd rather have a semantic model that can answer multitude of questions, many reports on top of that semantic model. And as we think about data products we're trying to produce, the best thing to do is how can I have a very highly effective semantic model and serve that to the self-service business that can then go build their own reports on top of it. So like you're now saying, okay, we have a team of engineers who are going to build various pieces of this data platform system. Those leaders, the ones who are getting paid the most, it's most cost effective if you put them in positions where they're building tests, writing automation, using the DevOps process to ensure that all the junior developers on the team or the newer developers to the team, that their work meets the standards of the senior. And so I don't, maybe Matias, you and I, or maybe it was us. I can't remember where it was happening here, but there's this whole concept of like, we're potentially underutilizing our smartest, most brilliant developers here because we have them going in and they're fixing pages and reports because someone moved the visual, a measure was broken, and the visual broke. Like that's not what those users should be doing. And I think about John Kursky and what he's doing with like Playwright and how he's using it on top of reporting with some like automated testing of things. Like how can we detect when a report has a broken visual automatically with a test, right? These are the things I shouldn't have to pay someone to put eyes on a report to see if everything works. I should be able to automate that. And your most brilliant, smartest people should be figuring out how to solve that with automation. One, it keeps your talent there because you're giving them the hardest problems. And then two, every single junior developer now has this keyhole funnel. I don't know what you want to call it. There's now a requirement that they need to go hit in order to get things out the door. And so that increases the entire team's output and productivity. Nothing gets through the door with errors. I can't tell you how many times we've been in organizations. I've walked in, we've built stuff, someone else has built things, and it gets shipped out, and the feedback comes back, we're on the wrong page. You saved it on page 2. It should have been on page 1. Okay, let's go fix that. Oh, you accidentally left a filter in the filter pane on, which now when I go into the report, there's now no data. Like, shoot. Okay, go back to the report, erase the filter, save it, then ship. Like, these are things we should be able to easily test for and make sure that when this report goes out, it's on this page. There are no filters in the filter pane, or if there is one, it's only the last 30 days or whatever the requirement is, right? But you want those things, set the rules and walk away.
Yeah. Can I add one thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
I do agree. Seniors in charge of automating tests, absolutely. Let's also add pair programming and mentoring. Ooh. Because you make it sound like you've got sort of two worlds, of seniors and juniors, and they're not allowed to interact other than through
totally wrong
failing tests or so, right?
Yeah.
So I would definitely say part of DevOps culture is to actively mix, do pair programming sessions, actually have people sit side by side, which can also be done virtually. And pass on things that way. But
I love
generally,
that.
I do agree with you.
Yes. Well, and I like this idea of the mixing here. I was just hearing a little YouTube short. I just watch YouTube way too much, but this morning I was literally watching a YouTube short, and they were talking about the I think it's the Marines, and the Marines self-organize for mealtime. And whenever it's mealtime, the newest individuals, the ones that have the lowest rank, always go first. And the one who eats last is the most senior person. And the reason they do that is they want to make sure that all of the senior individuals are looking after the new individuals. How do we make sure everyone is fed, cared for? There's a respect that is, we want to instill a culture of people who know what they're doing. We must help guide, mentor the newer members of the group. And I think it's a great principle. Love it. Tommy, reactions, thoughts?
I really don't want to. I mean, you can't say something about the Marines and I disagree, but no, it's not.
Good luck, Tommy.
It's not. No, but I just want to put this in. a little greater context here. One, from my end, I agree with everything you said.
But here comes the but.
But kind of thing, you are assuming that the Marines are in place at a lot of organizations. So when we're talking about the someone starting with source control, starting with DevOps, and they have been doing Power BI, there is no foundation for it, then this gets a little difficult. Mike, it's funny because you were bringing up the testing solutions out there. None of them are endorsed by Microsoft. And even though we have Git and Fabric, it is still way limited in terms of how we can test for things and what most what most source controls can do. So the thing is, we really we have Git, but we don't have what usually like that those other features without a ridiculous amount of hacking and customization.
Let me jump on your testing comment here, because I like your testing comment a lot, Tommy. There is a couple tools the community has built to aid with this a little bit. And I think we're going to start seeing more and more of this coming out as well. I think Matias has words on this as well, but I'll just point out, I think this idea of testing a report or being able to apply tests back to a report, whenever I go to a conference, people who are speaking about this topic, testing of things, how to automate some of this, those sessions are always packed. They're always got a lot of people in there, because I think, Tommy, you're talking about something here that's striking a nerve. It's hitting people that are in that space, that are really like, it's simple things. I guess one of the so Matias, I think you shared a link here. So Nat Van, I don't remember his name exactly, how to say his whole name, but he is a gentleman who is he's made a Power BI inspector tool. So it's basically a tool over on GitHub, and you can you need a framework to be able to write the test, and then another bit of technology to then run the test and just verify something is correct against whatever that thing may be. Really cool idea, but there's not a lot of to your point, Tommy, there's not a lot of Microsoft driven tooling that's going to do this. And I don't think they are going to do it, honestly. I think they're going to leave it up to the community to figure these things out. Sorry, I'll pause there.
Yeah. And I don't want to go too much in the weeds with testing. Matthias, where would you even put testing in terms of that journey for a team or a user when it comes to they're listening today and you're like, you know what, DevOps and me, that is something I want to do. This is a road I want to go down. At what point does that become serious from the testing point of view? And I guess I don't want to change the subject too much here, but where do I start? Where do I want to focus and get started right away? If you know what, I do want to dance with this DevOps at my organization.
I love it.
So, but I don't know what steps to take first.
Well, those are two very distinct questions, but let's start with the latter. How do I get started? I mentioned it before, right? None of that works without source control. So that's the very first thing. If you don't know Git, you better go and learn it, right? This is one of the most fundamental skills everyone's got to have if they're in working with some sort of digital products. No excuses. It's got to be done. Well, you can start, in Fabric, Power BI, you can start quite easily just by enabling Git integration if you want to. That doesn't require any refactoring, doesn't require completely rethinking your projects. You can just go into existing workspaces and have the artifacts pushed to GitHub or Azure DevOps, at least as a starting point. I'm not necessarily proposing that that's the final, the ultimate solution here, but it's a very neat and cheap and easy way for you to have a view of, what do those things in that workspace look like from as code, right? So seeing things as code, understanding, what the code behind a notebook or behind a semantic model or behind a report or behind a lakehouse or so, what it looks like and what it means and how it changes if you click certain buttons, if you make certain changes in your workspace, that's definitely a required and a really useful starting point. But coming to your testing question, then, I mean that's sort of having automated tests in place is definitely on the other end of the scale, I'd say, right? So one, because we have relatively poor tooling in place, we've got a few bits and pieces, mostly from the community, and everyone who has contributed is a real hero. But generally, let's say that space has a lot of scope for innovation, to put a positive spin on it. It also doesn't seem that Microsoft has any interest in that space, so you're going to have to look elsewhere. And if you then want to integrate testing tools, you're going to have to go to a CI server where you basically run your own pipelines, right? This is, again, not something that natively sits in Fabric or Power BI. There may well be some custom workloads from some ISVs at some point, but today you're going to have to basically use your own pipeline runner.
Yeah.
And
can I ask? There's a question that actually came in. I think that's actually really relevant, and actually kind of relates to your point here. I think, Matias, is what you're just describing here is a little bit. One of the things that we like around the Git experiences here is when we use the PBIP format, when we use like the technology, the DevOps portion of this, how do we secure the data connection away from the PBIX file that we've been traditionally using? So, I guess up until this point, I've been doing a lot of take a Power BI PBIX file, save the file, and push it on SharePoint. With that file goes all the data that I saved into it. When we move into this new world, CICD, PBIP formats, what happens here, and how does that, from the data connection standpoint, how does that secure us? This is another security, like another aspect we haven't talked about yet on the, like about this around DevOps, but like there is a security piece to this as well. If I have access to the SQL Server to go get the data and refresh my model to work on it, but Tommy does not, does that mean we can't work on the same thing again? Can we still, like, maybe unpack that a little bit from the question here? How do we secure the data, and how does this new format help us secure the connection, and who's actually allowed to touch the connections?
Good question. And in fact, this is one of the big benefits you're going to get from having a source control approach, because by definition, if you use source control, you're only going to have metadata in there, right? You're not going to have your company's ERP database in there, as in the actual tables and columns and rows. So unlike in a PBIX world, where potentially a PBIX file actually contains at least a portion of your database, right? So security-wise, from a data security point of view, it's a huge benefit already. However, sadly, we're also inheriting a new problem here, which is anyone who's talking about deployment pipelines and Git integration in Fabric will get to immediately, because it means, well, where is the data ultimately coming from, right? So you need to think about orchestrating data load, which is sadly something Microsoft is completely missing in their own CICD picture. So that right now requires manual intervention, which is a massive anti-pattern from a DevOps point of view. It requires you, if you want to put pipelines and CI/CD pipelines in place to figure out how to orchestrate data load. So that again is not something you can easily get off the shelf today. It's not something you can just click a few buttons and you get that. For full transparency, if I may, I actually started a new venture end of last year. A company
Excellent.
called Navigator, and this problem is exactly what we're focusing on. So we are working on a Azure and Fabric focused DevOps product, which is meant to bring all the benefits from DevOps to a really wide range of customers by taking away those pains of setup and configuration and figuring stuff out. So it's meant to bring it's meant to bring the best practices, evolved in the industry to people via a tool that pretty much guides them through the process.
It's great.
It's something I'm working on, and
Yeah, I love it.
We're working on something I'm extremely passionate about, as you can imagine. But
Yeah.
we're doing that precisely because it's way too hard today.
Yes, I totally agree.
I've personally been setting up CICD pipelines for practically 20 years now.
Yeah.
And so you could argue, I know that stuff a little bit, and I still find it way too hard having
And you're the expert
to put that in place for any new project today.
Right.
So in a way, our product is solving my own personal problem, because I want this to be easier, right? And I want to be able to give this to teams, that can't afford to spend 10 years learning stuff. They should just be able to get the best practices in a ready-made tool. So there we go. Let me just.
I love that story, and I think that's it's. I mean, Matias, you're need up born out of this DevOps thing. This is the same need I had with working with JSON theme files. Too difficult. It needs making complex things simple is actually quite challenging. So with this, I do want to we're at just about at time here, so I do want to start wrapping. Let's just do quickly final thoughts through everyone here. I'm going to just kind of go on a limb here a little bit, DevOps is way more than CICD. I think it's the main point I want to make out here. CICD is something that Microsoft's talking a lot about right now. DevOps is a much bigger story on this. I think this pattern, or learning about this, or educating yourself on this space, is something everyone should be doing in the Power BI space. I think this is something that everyone can benefit from. I think there's also easy entry points to some of this. Again, it may not be the full, DevOps experience that we're going to maybe talk about here in the podcast, but at least get started, because if you never take the next step, you're never going to get further and become more efficient and get better at this. So for me, some team experiences, just turn on the Git synchronization between your workspace and the Git repo. That might be just as much as you need. It's a UI. It's already built into Power BI. Once you're on anything premium, it could be premium per user or anything Fabric, P, SKUs, all this stuff. As long as you just turn it on, you're notified when something's different compared to what's inside the Git storage area for your files. And I think we're going to continue to see tools from the community. Again, we're going to keep talking on it because we think it's so incredibly valuable here. It's easy to get started. Just start the journey. You're going to find value from it. But if you don't ever think about it, learning it, you'll never get anywhere. Let me kick over to Tommy. What's your final thought here, Tommy?
Yeah, I'm really excited for the next few episodes to really be diving into this more. I think the misconception is that it's all source control, and understanding it just sounds like more work rather than just opening an application and publishing it. But I think the biggest thing here is if you care about what you do, and all the times we have had to backtrack, not even just when we make mistakes, but listen, this is the way I think our industry is going. It was nice while it lasted when we had just a binary thing to work with, but honestly, with all the other things that are in Fabric and just become more prevalent, there's going to be a point of either get on the bus or because we're leaving the station. And I really think this is just going to be part of our normal workflow.
Agreed. Matias, any final thoughts here as we kind of wrap on our first topic here around DevOps?
Approach Git, learn source control. Again,
Yeah.
there's no way around it. If you want to really embrace this as a different way of thinking and culture, and you want a slightly light-hearted approach to it, there's a book recommendation. You should read The Phoenix Project, which is a novel about DevOps and all the things that can go miserably wrong if you don't actually follow good DevOps practices.
Yes.
So if you just want to get into that mindset and want to learn about it, in a light and enjoyable way, read the book. It's like 100 pages or maybe a bit more, and it's definitely it's a classic. Let's put it that way. The Phoenix Project.
Excellent. Love it. So I'll put that link for that book. The Phoenix Project. It's written by Gene
Kim, Kevin
Gene Kim,
Burr, and George Spafford.
I got
a
it. So
novel
I'll put it
about
here
IT,
in the chat.
DevOps, and helping your business win.
I love it. All right, so I'll put that here in the chat window as well. Just in case you haven't read it, I'm sure some of our readers would love to see it. So I'll put that out there in the chat window. There's a link for that out there in case you want to go check it out. Great recommendation of the book. And again, we're the ones in the thick of it. We're the ones in the technical experts in this area here. We're going to have to do some convincing to leadership to like get them to buy into this. Leadership should already be bought in. They should already know this is the way to go. But I think sometimes it requires some convincing. And how many sideways projects do you need to start really thinking this is a better way? Love it. Great conversation today. Thank you very much, Matias, for joining us. As always, thank you for... Yeah, we appreciate it. Thank you for listening, everyone, on the podcast. We know your hour of time is valuable. We hope this was tickling your ear, giving you some things to think about on your run or your bike or whatever. We hear a lot of feedback by people, man, my run is just so boring. But we love the podcast to entertain our mind while we're running or doing our exercise. So congratulations on working a whole hour of exercise with us. We appreciate you. You're doing great. Keep going. With that being said, if you did like this episode, if you like what we're talking about here and learning things that are new, please share with somebody else. We'd love for you to communicate this podcast to other people as well. Tommy, where else can we find the podcast?
You find us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. Do you have a question, idea, or a topic that you want us to talk about in a future episode? Head over to powerbi.com/podcast, leave your name and a great question. And finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central on all Power BI Tips social media channels.
Thank you all very much, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.